Porno Cops, that's right, baby. When law enforcement needs pornography. Alright guys, we got a new section to the America Happens website called the Whistleblowers Forum, where you could go on there and anonymously or using your name post anything that you want and contact other whistleblowers to talk about what's really going on out there. Alright, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. Today we have a whistleblower. We're just going to call him Joe. And you know what? We'll leave it at that. It's somebody with privileged information, somebody that, as you will hear, knows what they're talking about. And so, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mr. Miller. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Let's obviously dive into the topic at hand, which is the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Bianco. You know, give us some bombshells that things that you know because you have been privileged to be in certain positions.
Well, I don't even know where to start with that, Mr. Miller. I mean, we can talk about, former Assistant Sheriff El Delgado and him intervening in a homicide investigation, or Mr. Bianco himself being involved in a pursuit where shots are being fired. He's got civilians in his vehicle. Or his former assistant sheriff, Robert Gunzel, that was involved in some pay-to-play scheme for Mr. Bianco. We've also got Porngate, where...
Well, let's pause on that because obviously, you know, jokingly, we were calling this Porno Cops. What's going on with Porno Cops? Tell me what's going on there.
Well, the way this all started, it goes back to a sergeant named who had quite a bit of photographs of his wife, kind of risque type photographs of his wife all over his cubicle. And it just seemed very odd that he had these these various photos of skimpy outfits and whatnot. There you go. And so, he does a lot of, posting on Instagram, him and his wife visiting different countries and so on and so forth. So I've seen him at several events where he just kind of parades his wife around. And it wasn't until he actually posted a certain picture on his Instagram that had a kind of like a signature on the photograph, and it showed his wife's, like, I guess, like her handle or her stage name or something like that. And when you're basically in a bureau full of detectives, the minute they see those things, they immediately start searching the internet for that. And lo and behold, they found that Sergeant Tinker and his wife were on a website. I believe it's called OnlyFans or Fans Only. I'm not quite sure. And so they performed porn on this website. And apparently, Chad Bianco and the entire executive staff were well aware of all this. So, as the investigators saw all this pornographic material, it immediately just went out like wildfire. They got sent out to all the detectives, sheriff's department, captains, lieutenants, and so anyway, it made its way back to the executive staff. And so when they called Sergeant up and they said, "Hey, what's the deal with this? You were supposed to keep this quiet." He's like, "Well, I accidentally put the wrong photo on Instagram, and that's how it all came to be." And so, Bianco he's all about when he disciplines people. It's one of the catch-alls that he has is causing embarrassment to the department. And here you have a sergeant and his wife doing porn on the internet, and obviously it's embarrassing to the department. And rather than disciplining this guy and saying, "Hey, you need to knock this off," or choose either do porn or be a cop. What's your choice? Rather than that, they said, "Well, technically, nobody really complained about him, being involved in porn with his wife." And when they asked Sergeant about, whether or not he was getting paid for this, because you're not allowed to have outside employment without permission from the sheriff. They said, well, technically Sergeant is not getting paid. His wife is, so he's not making any money on this. So rather than discipline this guy for causing embarrassment for the department, and the media outlets here locally were well aware of that, but it didn't go any further. They swept it under the rug and said, well, since you're not making any money, we're just going to go ahead and not do anything about it, but just go ahead and kind of tone it down a little bit, which is unbelievable because you have somebody like, I'll say his name, some in the same area that's working there, a single man started dating. I'll just give you his first name. His first name is Dario. So Dario starts dating somebody who's no longer involved with her ex or her husband. She's separated or whatever. So the ex finds out that Dario is dating his wife, and Dario's a detective. The ex-husband calls the station and files a complaint about Dario dating his ex-wife. Well, Dario immediately gets disciplined for dating this guy's ex-wife and gets moved from the station where he's at and gets transferred somewhere else. And the whole thing was he caused embarrassment to the department. So how do you go from out doing porn to just some guy that's dating somebody, and he gets disciplined and he gets transferred, but Sergeant Tinker he's okay, and it all falls back on being part of the in crowd with Bianco. You're either in or you're out. His wife likes you or his wife doesn't like you. You're part of the Bunko Club. You're not part of the Bunko Club, and that's basically what happened with that.
Wow. What's going on here in these text messages?
So what this is talking about here is one of Chad Bianco's former chief deputies was involved in a brawl out in Las Vegas. I don't know the circumstances behind the brawl, but the police ended up coming out and he ended up being detained. I believe he was booked overnight and then released. And it was kind of supposed to be kept really hush hush, and really it was supposed to be kept quiet. And if you know the way the culture of law enforcement, nothing stays quiet. Nothing is sacred. The minute you say something, it spreads like wildfire. So, sure enough, the facts of the arrest came out, and so his name was Joseph Pemberton. So Joseph Pemberton gets arrested. He gets booked, and so they try to do a cover up. They don't say anything, and it wasn't until this gentleman that you're showing the text messages here, actually started questioning Chad Bianco regarding the arrest. And shortly thereafter, Chief Pemberton retired from the department. So I think it was within like a few weeks or maybe a month or so he retired. But there's a culture within Bianco's circle that it's always try to cover it up first until somebody finds out what occurred. Case in point, we're talking about former Assistant Sheriff Ed Delgado. Mm-hmm. Now, Ed Delgado was in charge of the Corrections Division, and he and a lieutenant named Brandy Swan learned of a homicide that occurred in their area, in the Woodcrest area of Riverside County. So Ed Delgado and Brandy Swan's kids went to school with the suspect of the homicide, a young man named Brady Castillo. Brady Castillo was accused of killing Isabella Ruiz. But unbeknownst to homicide investigators, Ed Delgado and Brandy Swan wrote a letter recommending leniency for the homicide suspect. Now, the Brady Castillo, I believe, was like 21 years old, and Isabella was somewhere around 19 or 20. But unbeknownst to homicide detectives and the family or anything like that, it wasn't until either the DA's office or somebody notified Detective Sandoval, who was the who was the primary on the homicide with our central homicide unit, they learned about these letters that were written for leniency of a homicide suspect. And the DA's office had agreed to go with manslaughter at that point without really conferring with the family or talking to Sandoval. So these letters were written without anybody's knowledge or consent. And so the question is, why is Ed Delgado and Brandy Swan trying to intervene in this homicide investigation? Well, nothing was being done about that. Basically, initially Delgado was just, hey, knock it off, you shouldn't have done that. And Brandy Swan, same thing. And it wasn't until people started raising questions about the letters that were written, did they actually do something about it? At that point, once the media started finding out and inquiring about these letters that were written, and I believe CPRA requests were written for those letters, to which the Sheriff's Department denied those letters exist, as well as the DA's office. But we all know that they exist. So Ed Delgado, he was not part of the in crowd, so he was ordered to retire shortly thereafter. Brandy Swan is part of the Bunko Club. The Bunko Club is Bianco's wife's, I guess, her little circle of friends that she has that she plays Bunko with.
Let me ask you: is like this whole the porno cop and his wife, is that part of that circle?
I don't think that they're part of that circle, but it's like with he's part of the in crowd. I don't know what he did to be part of that in crowd, but there is no way in hell, especially with Johnny Bianco being the self-proclaimed pillar of morality, that he would allow something like this to happen. Because, people have been disciplined for just dating somebody. And, he made it very clear that if you're having an affair with outside of your marriage, that you will be disciplined. But that's kind of selective discipline with him, because if you're part of his in crowd, let's say, Assistant Sheriff Herman Lopez, which you may have heard of Herman Lopez. His son was killed. He was part of I believe the 13 that were killed leaving Afghanistan. And believe me when I say that my heart goes out to him and his family. However, Herman Lopez is dirty. I mean, I hate to go there, but he is dirty. Him and Matt Jimenez were having an affair with the same community service office out of Palm Desert. So it's kind of like selective as far as who he goes after. So he didn't go after Herman Lopez. As a matter of fact, he promoted him. He didn't go after Matt Jimenez when Matt Jimenez's wife went over to the sheriff's department and raised hell about the affair that was going on. And so, so that right there was let go. And then you bring in the second in command. You bring Don Sharp in, who was having an affair with a community service officer out of Lake Elsinore. And it was so bad that Don Sharp's wife had to ride in the car with him back and forth to work just to make sure that he wasn't cheating or going somewhere he wasn't supposed to. And this, from what I understand, that's still going on to this day. Wow. And she's not a sheriff's department employee, but yet she's offered a ride in a county car where everybody else gets disciplined for, having people in your car that are not county employees. So, to be straight, it's just, he's just an absolute hypocrite when it comes to enforcement. His ability, I mean, how can I say this? He's dumb. Chad Bianco's just dumb. He's one of these knee-jerk reaction kind of guys, and you are a perfect example of that, Mr. Miller, of a knee-jerk reaction. He does this regularly. He does it almost to the point where it's become boring. because he does it so much. I mean, here we have, let me just give you a story of something that just occurred not too long ago. We had a sergeant. I'm not going to say their name or anything like that, but there was a sergeant that was working in the jails, and they had a very violent inmate that was threatening to hurt himself, hurt deputies, break windows, and just basically not cooperating. Just a very violent inmate. So this sergeant, good for them, they did the right thing. They said, "Well, what's it going to take to calm you down?" He says, "I need to make a phone call." So the sergeant asks, if I let you make a phone call, will you calm down and will you cooperate? He says, "Yes, I will cooperate." So the sergeant pulls their cell phone out of their pocket and says, "What's the phone number?" He gives her the phone number. She dials the number. They answer. He has a short conversation on the cell phone, and they hang up the phone, and the inmate complies and does what he's supposed to. Now, rather than, you know, give a commendation to the sergeant for defusing this potential violent situation where the inmate was gonna potentially hurt himself, hurt staff, damage property, they put her on administrative leave. They walked her out of the facility because she allowed an inmate to use the phone. Well, it's not like she handed the inmate the phone.
Yeah.
She dialed the number for him to try to prevent anybody from getting hurt and from property being damaged. But that's the kind of stupid things that Bianco does. And you even have the detective that's doing the investigation say this is straight out. This is stupid. But yet Bianco, rather than try to get the facts first and before he makes a decision, he does this knee jerk reaction where what he doesn't understand is there's people's lives at stake. He's an emotional decision maker, and it's to his detriment. I mean, he's just a terrible human being. He's terrible. And when he initially became sheriff, there was the honeymoon period. Everybody was happy. Oh, he's going to be great. He's saying this, he's saying that, he's saying all the right things. But what the people don't know, and those of us that have been close to him know, is that it's all bullshit. He's basically just telling you what you want to hear, but he doesn't believe it. This whole I'm a super conservative, I'm a super Christian, it's all bullshit. None of it's true. He does what is going to get him out in the center stage, out in front of the limelight. If it benefits him in his future endeavors of becoming governor, he's all over it. You're a perfect example of that, Mr. Miller. He did the same exact thing to you, and he's done it to other people.
So how do you guys figure out that this guy, because I saw the video clips, you don't really necessarily see his face completely, but how did you guys figure out it was the same guy?
Well, the watch, number one, but then there's another.
So this watch he's wearing, and sorry guys, I'm gonna play some video here. This might cut us off for a second, but so that look at that watch that he's wearing, guys, and then so same watch basically.
Well, same watch, and obviously, there's more video there where she shows most of her face. Unless she's going out behind his back and making porn videos. But we know that's there's no doubt about it. We worked together. We were in the same office together.
This is a picture of him, by the way, next to the guy that arrested me, Coronado or whatever his name is. But yeah, them staying together.
Yeah. So Bianco is he is what you call a super hypocrite. And there's, as you may know, there was a couple years back, we had a couple of deputies that were killed in the line of duty, which was a dark couple of months for all of us here at the sheriff's department. But what the people don't know is that Bianco was all over inside that pursuit. I mean, he had no business being there. He was in Los Angeles having a meeting regarding the Rose Parade, and we'll talk about the Rose Parade more a little bit later. But he was having a meeting about the Rose Parade, and he was in his what we call his POV, his personally owned vehicle. It was a BMW. And so all this is going on when Deputy Cordero was shot and killed, and they're in pursuit. And during the pursuit, obviously you're aware that we border San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County SWAT team was in the area right near the Harupa Valley area, High Grove area, because the pursuit went all over the place in the San Bernardino County, Riverside County border. And San Bernardino County SWAT team was there and ready to go. And they came over our area and said, "Hey, this is San Bernardino County Sheriff's the SWAT team. We're here. We're right here on the border. Give us the green light, and we'll help you take this guy down." And Chad Bianco gets on the air, and I'm sitting there listening to all this as it unfolds. Chad Bianco gets on the air and he says, "Negative." So the pursuit continues to go on. There's shots being fired. Lo and behold, Chad Bianco is in the pursuit. He is in the pursuit in his personally owned vehicle, which is, okay, he's in his personally owned vehicle. But what the public doesn't know is that his wife was riding shotgun. His wife is in the car as there's shots being fired by the suspect back towards the deputy, and he's in the conga line right up front because he wants to be there, because when the pursuit comes to the end, he wants to be there so that the media can see him there. He denied San Bernardino County Sheriff from coming onto into our county and assisting with the apprehension of the suspect, the homicide suspect. And why is that? Why would you deny that? It's because he wanted all of the accolades. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department have all the accolades. If this guy was shot and killed, which he was, the suspect was shot and killed, he wanted to make sure that it was the Riverside County Sheriff's Department that did the shooting and not the San Bernardino County Sheriff, because he didn't want it to appear that the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department came into Riverside County to save the day. Mm-hmm. So not only was this pursuit going out longer than it was supposed to, and the threat and the shots fired probably went on longer than they should have. And he's got his wife sitting in a car as her shots being fired both ways. It's just, he is such an egomaniac that the public isn't aware of this stuff. They see him on TV, he says a few things here and there, and they're like, "Oh, he's so great." And look, it's not like we're all a bunch of Democrats or liberals. We're all conservative. But even as a conservative, I have to stand back, or we have to stand back and look at this guy and say, this guy's full of shit. He is an absolutely terrible person.
I'm going to show some of these images that I got here. I'm going to flip through these if you want to talk through any of them.
Well, that's Chad Bianco and Sherry Doolittle. And, Sherry's a very nice person. But she was recently promoted to lieutenant, and then shortly after that, the promotion was taken away because she's made a lot of questionable choices. But like I said, if you're part of the bunco crowd, you get promoted. But there was a lot of pushback regarding this promotion, and a lot of people were unhappy. So they basically they gave him a hard time about that, and then she just retired. So that right there is that went around. I don't know who sent that out, but apparently that letter there made its way throughout the media, the board of supervisors, the Department of Justice. But everything in that letter, from what I read, is absolutely true. It's 100% true. Again, I believe when I saw I think her name is Clarissa Cervantes. And so what happened with Clarissa Cervantes, and I don't know if you covered this with, I saw your podcast with Mr. Lujan, by the way, and he was 100% dead on. So Clarissa Cervantes, and you're gonna have to forgive me, I don't know exactly which ward she's from, but She was downtown Riverside. I don't remember exactly what she was down there for, some kind of an event. And as she was walking by, there was some protesters out there. They had vandalized one of the historic courthouse in downtown Riverside. It's a beautiful courthouse. And so she was walking by, nothing else, just walking by. And she asked the deputies how they were doing that evening. How you doing, deputies? And the deputies responded back, and she just asked a question: "What's going on?" "Oh, we've got some protesters here." And once again, the knee jerk reaction. Somebody had said that they had saw her there, and he automatically assumed that she was there to protest, and that was the farthest thing from the truth. And as a matter of fact, she was just walking by on her way to her car, her and a group of her friends. And so he puts out these Facebook posts where she's lucky or something like that, or he would have arrested her or something like that. And she ended up filing a civil suit against Bianco, which was settled. And I really don't know the details of the settlement, but yeah, he kind of ate crow on that one. Wow. And here's another thing is that he is such an egomaniac that just recently there was a sergeant that was and that right there is Mike Yarbrough, I think, on the right there. I believe Mr. Lujan talked about that, but just real quick, in just typical Bianco fashion, there was a federal lawsuit regarding a use of force that occurred in Lake Elsinore area, and the use of force was legitimate. It was a officer involved shooting where a sergeant shot the suspect, I believe, 3 times, and one of the times that the suspect was struck, he was on his back. And from what I remember, when I saw the review of the video, the suspect was when he was struck, he actually turned, and the next round struck him in the back. So anyway, they filed a federal lawsuit, civil rights lawsuit, and the family came prior to trial and said, "Hey, we're willing to settle out of court for $500,000." And so they took that to Bianco and said, "Hey, the family's willing to settle out of court for $500,000." So Bianco tells them to pound sand. Absolutely not. In typical Bianco fashion, tells them to pound sand because his ego got in the way and said, it's going to cost. And rather than saying it's going to cost X amount of dollars to fight this in court and drag all my people down to Los Angeles to federal court, it would be easier just to settle for $500,000. Well, he chose not to settle. It ends up going to trial, and the the they end up finding for the family to the tune of $10 million. So $9.5 million more than the family originally tried to settle for, and that was Bianco's ego getting in the way rather than doing the right thing. Typical Bianco.
So what's this over here?
So that right there, see, what a lot of people don't know about because I've known Johnny for a long time, and he's always talked about he wants to be sheriff. He wants to be sheriff. He was a terrible deputy. He was mediocre at best as a deputy sheriff. He got promoted to investigator, and he went to internal affairs, and that's when he became Bob Doyle's, hitman. So Bob Doyle will say, "Hey, I need you to conduct this investigation on so and so and make him go away or fire him." So Chad would go out there and he would do this shitty investigation and not put all the details or facts in the investigation, skew the investigation to make it appear that these deputies did something wrong. Because look, I mean, me personally, I liked Bob Doyle, but Bianco was Bob Doyle's hitman. Bob Doyle was a sheriff. So this article was written by, I believe it was Stone Basalia. Yeah, it sure is. And it outlines the circumstances of a case that Bianco worked on, where it was so egregious that the the law firm actually wrote an opinion regarding the investigation and Bianco's tactics regarding the investigation. And there you have it right in front of you so that you can read for yourself. So, but this is nothing new, Vem. I mean, this is just, he's like, you know, Bianco surrounds himself with his buddies rather than to do to have the right type of leadership where you surround yourself. I mean, look at Donald Trump, for example. Donald Trump, he surrounds himself with brilliant people. Well, Bianco's the opposite. He surrounds himself with people that are dumb and that are just going to be like, yes, I will toe the line. Yes, I'll do what you want. Yes, no problem. You know, one of his guys is David Lelevere. I mean, are you kidding me? The guy's as dumb as a box of rocks. This guy is, a former cokehead. He was involved with biker gangs where they did an investigation on him where they believed Sergeant Kent Wurgis and the Special Investigations Bureau were following this guy around and followed him to several biker bars where he was involved with all these bikers. And back in the 70s, I mean, he was doing coke like it's going out of style. But this is Johnny Bianco's best buddy, his henchman, the guy that he sends out to get things done. I mean, he's basically his muscle.
Is it this guy right here?
No. I don't believe you. No, not that guy. I don't know who that. That's a new promotion. But Dave Lelevere is basically Bianco's buddy. I mean, they go everywhere together. The guy's dumb as a box of rocks. And it's all about doing favors. You've got Dave Lelevere, whose son was booked into jail for a felony warrant, and he goes to jail. Okay, and one of the first things they ask you when you're getting booked in is, do you have any contraband on you? Do you have any drugs, needles, knives, weapons, anything that's going to hurt me, stick me, poke me? And the answer is no. So they bring Dave Jr. through the booking process, and he's got dope. He's got a bunch of dope, and from what I understand, it was fentanyl. Now, being that people are falling out left and right of fentanyl on the jails, you figure that they would have prosecuted this guy, right? So somebody actually wrote up a report, and they filed charges on him, but lo and behold, the charges get dropped. Now, how does that happen? I know when I listened to the podcast with Mr. Lujan, he had mentioned that Mike Hestron's a good guy, and he doesn't think anything, that there's anything going on between the two. Well, I strongly disagree. I think it's quite the opposite. And I know Mr. Lujan has been gone for a little bit, but we're still here. So, I mean, the things that we see where you've got preferential treatment with Dave Lelevere Jr., where charges get dropped, where you've got Mike Yarbrough, which Mike gave you a little bit of insight. I mean, I thought, from what I remember, Michael Lujan might know a little bit better than me, but from what I remember, is Mike Yarbrough actually drew his weapon at the witness, and he was drunk. Not the victim, but Yarbrough was drunk, and he drew his weapon, and he remained the sergeant of SWAT until people started making a stink about it. But anyway, so you have that preferential treatment. You got Mike Yarbrough, you've got the former undersheriff Dennis Vrooman. Forgive me, Dennis Vrooman. During the COVID pandemic, Dennis Vrooman, his wife, and several other people from the executive staff were out in Palm Desert. You're familiar with Palm Desert because it's right next to Coachella. They're at a restaurant I believe it was the Marriott. And so it was during COVID, and there was strict rules in place regarding wearing a mask. Well, Dennis Vrooman's wife was not wearing a mask. And so the security guard came up to Mrs. Vrooman and said, "Ma'am, would you mind putting your mask on?" To the point where she became belligerent, started yelling at the security guard, and slapped the taste out of his mouth. I mean, just flat out slapped him. And nothing happened. There was a report written, and it was sent to the district attorney's office for review, and the district attorney's office did nothing with it. Now, they try to keep that hush-hush because they don't want anybody to know about this, but like I told you, nothing is sacred with the sheriff's department. We used to call it, as for those of us that are a little bit older, as the jail turns, or RSO turns.
Yeah.
So rather than file charges on her and book her for assault, they let her slide. They did nothing about it. And this poor security guard got the taste slapped out of his mouth simply for following directions and following the mandate. Say, hey, put your mask on. And look, I'm do I agree with the mask? No, I don't. But you're not going to slap the shit out of a security guard just for simply asking, put your mask on. You've got that there, and you've got the former assistant sheriff's wife, who was Raul Vergara. His wife was busted for embezzlement. Now, did she see any prison time? No. Did she get booked into jail and all that stuff? Nothing. I mean, I think they ended up, she got no jail term or something like that. I think she pled to something silly, but I think she got charged with embezzling something like $300,000 from what I understand. And absolutely nothing happened. So you talk about the preferential treatment, the disparaging treatment between, the common citizen and members of the in crowd, with Bianco. And, so there was a CPRA request because I remember I was there. There was a CPRA request regarding the police report on Ruman's wife slapping the shit out of the security guard. And I remember because the CPRA requests go to the sheriff's, was it I believe it's the second or third floor, no, the third or fourth floor over at sheriff's admin. And so the request comes in for the report. And so they're like, did you hear about this? They're like, yeah, I heard something about this. Well, let me call Palm Desert Station to find out what the deal is with the report. Oh my God, it's like somebody set off a bomb. They called the Palm Desert Station. The Palm Desert Station, the sheriff's administration over there at Palm Desert Station, I mean, has a conniption. They order that report be under lock and key, and the head office assistant's office, and that nobody is to touch or see or get a copy of that report. So essentially, the CPRA unit was told to pound sand and to tell them that report does not exist. So I mean, that's some of the cover up that I'm talking about. And it goes a lot deeper. I mean, it goes a lot deeper. I know Mr. Lujan had mentioned something about 1-day wraps, where the buses were wrapped. Now, what people don't know is that the sheriff's department was initially going to use the same company that the San Bernardino County Sheriff's uses for their buses, but Chad and his little in crowd, he befriended this gentleman named Brian Ware, the owner of 1-day wraps. So rather than go through the bidding process to get this wraps done on the buses, Bianco just said, have him do the wraps. So he did the wraps. And after the wraps were completed, when there were some questions regarding the bidding process for those jobs, somebody spoke out and said, hey, this is not right. We can't be doing this. And this has happened repeatedly, where somebody speaks out about the process regarding the contracts. So Zach Hall, which is another piece of work, Zach Hall should have been fired a long time ago for lying when he was questioned about having sex with one of his subordinates. And during the questioning, he denied it, but little did he know that the other department member had already dimed him off and said, yeah, we were having sex. So that's Zach Hall. So Zach Hall is told, hey, go out there and make this right. Somehow figure it out so that it looks like we've gone out and we've had all these bids on these bus wraps. So way after the fact, after the buses have been wrapped, Zach Hall orders people to go out there and get bids on a job that's already been done. And he said, quote unquote, make sure that they're a lot higher than what we already paid. So that's how they cover things up. I mean, we've had contractors with the sheriff's department they have come up to me and said, there is something shady going on with this Ramon Tadros guy who's in charge of the contracts and construction with the sheriff's department. He said, from what I understand, they are overbidding all of these jobs throughout the county. All of these Orange County contractors came to Riverside County when Robert Gunzel came over here, and he took position as assistant sheriff for Bianco. So Ramon Tadros was one of those. He was the construction guy over in Orange County, and Gunzel brought him over. So this contractor says there is something shady going on with the contracts that are happening. These contracts are being way overbid. And from what I understand, the money that is being sent or paid to these contractors, a portion of that is being kicked back to Bianco's campaign. So, and I'm sure you heard when I listened to the podcast, Mr. Lujan had mentioned about these outrageous change orders on some of these jobs where, you know, the initial bid was $50,000 and now you're at $450,000 for a hood for a stove, or, you know, bathrooms that are, you know, $800,000, or, you know. So from what I understand and from what this contractor told me is that a huge portion of that is being kicked back to Bianco's campaign. So, you know, and I tell you, Mr. Miller, all you need to do is follow the money. There are people that are working there right now that are concerned about what is taking place regarding the contracts. You know, and you talk about, you know, we talked about Robert Gunzel. I know Mr. Lujan had mentioned something about Robert Gunzel and the ticket fixing that was going on over at Harupa Valley Station. But what the public doesn't know is that there was a lot more going on of that Bianco tried to hide. So basically, what was happening is we had contractors that were doing work at the academy, the sheriff's academy, called the Ben Clark Training Center. What happened is we have a commercial enforcement guy that goes out there and he targets big rig trucks and things like that, and does inspections on these commercial vehicles to ensure that everything's in proper working condition. So what was occurring is these contractors and their big equipment was getting cited. Those citations can be anywhere from $5, $6, $10,000. They're hefty fines. So one of them in particular got cited, and the fine was going to be somewhere around $10,000. So Robert Gunzel contacted the captain over at the sheriff's parish station and says, "Hey, make sure that deputy does not show up for court, because if the deputy doesn't show up for court, then the case is dismissed." So good on the captain over there, and said, I'm not doing that. But Robert Gunzel had asked them not to show up for court because, according to Robert Gunzel, what he was going to have to do was going to adjust the price of the contract to offset the cost of the citation. So basically what was going to happen is, so if the contractor was going to have to pay $10,000 for the fine, Robert Gunzel was going to ensure that the contract was upped by $10,000 to offset the price of the citation. And from what I understand, you can probably do a CPRA request on this. There was several emails. Not that I understand. I know that there are several emails on this, and this is not the first time where Robert Gunzel had tried to intervene on things like this, matters like this, or investigations. In the Harupa Valley area, where he tried to intervene. And Bianco, he is. If you're not a friend of his, then all I can say is beware. We had an incident over in Harupa Valley where a fireman had damn near beat a black transient man, to death. And Bianco ordered that case not be turned over to the district attorney's office. And there's emails on that where he says, under no circumstances are you to send this case to the district attorney's office. Well, and I hope you follow up with the captain over there at Harupa Station. But the captain said, absolutely not. I will not do that. I'm sending this to the DA's office. And that came straight from Bianco, where Bianco was ordering people not to file cases with the district attorney's office because they were his friends. And likewise with Robert Gunsel, where he tried to intervene on a coach that was ordering kids to beat up on another kid. He was promoting bullying of kids, and Robert Gunsel tried to intervene and try to keep the case from going to the district attorney's office. Well, this same captain said, absolutely not. We won't do that. We will send this to the DA's office, and they can make the decision from there. So this is not a one-time deal with Bianco. This is constant. Not only is he dirty, but he is vindictive.
I mean, how has he been kept in power for so long? Is it just because the DA runs cover for him?
Well, he's got his people in place. I mean, we had an investigation that had started with the former auditor controller, Paul Angulo, and it was during the elections. They had requested a bunch of documents regarding some of their what was forgive me, I'm trying to think back here to what it was, but they were looking into some of the spending regarding Bianco, and there was some questionable contracts and expenditures that were going on. So Paul Angulo, it was during the elections, Chad Bianco endorsed the other guy that's in there now. Paul Angulo ended up losing the election for auditor controller, and lo and behold, the investigation goes away. Yeah, and Bianco and the new auditor controller, and forgive me, his name escapes me, but they are tight. They are two peas in a pod. And then, you take that and then you look at Mike Hestron, and Bianco said himself, he couldn't have said any better. He said, we're one and the same. And you can look at some of his podcasts where he says that they're one and the same. He goes, you can just call us Chad Hestron. And those words came out of his mouth. There is just so much more, and, I hate to think, that Bianco is any kind of a racist or anything like that. I wouldn't try to go there, but he surrounds himself and he says things come out of his mouth that are very offensive. Like for instance, he's got a female chief that works for him. She's a black lady, very, very nice lady. But I sat there and I couldn't believe the words that came out of Bianco's mouth, where he tells us that he quote unquote he tolerates her, and he calls her dumb. And I'm like, I'm sitting there looking at him, I'm like, I don't even know what to say, because he's sitting there saying that he tolerates this black lady. And I'm like, that's not something that you should be saying, especially in a crowd of people where, we could actually, say something about that, but nobody's going to say anything. But he's, you take his affiliation with the Oath Keepers, which whatever, okay, the Oath Keepers, okay. But then we circle back to Dave Lelevere, where we witness him spewing the N-word, saying derogatory statements about Hispanics and black people. And there was a sergeant that had that all on video. He recorded it all. But that sergeant became part of the in crowd, so that video disappeared with that sergeant. But I mean, he is just a bad hypocrite, vindictive person. Just a terrible person, and he so wants to be in the spotlight. For instance, there's a equestrian group, a horse riding group out of Temecula. Every year they go to the Rose Parade. Well, when I told you that Bianco was over there at the Rose Parade, meeting with the people from the Rose Parade, is because he had pressured the people from Temecula not to participate in the Rose Parade so that he could participate in the Rose Parade, because he wanted to ride his horse up there, and he wanted the entire nation to see him up there as America's sheriff riding his horses through the Rose Parade. When the reality was he wasn't even supposed to be there. The people from Temecula, the horse riding group from Temecula, were pushed out so that he could be in. But that's just the way he is. I mean, and just following up a little bit more on the contracts deal. I mean, there was part of the executive staff that was up there with the contracts. There was a lady there, and her last name escapes me, but I believe her name was Rebecca. But Rebecca had discussed her concerns about Ramon Tadros, and it wasn't even a discussion. It was a flat out yelling match between her and Ramon. And she went to one of the chiefs or one of the assistant sheriffs and said that we can't do this like this. We can't be doing this. A short time later, Rebecca was called into, I believe, either the undersheriff, either Dennis, I believe it was Dennis Bruman, was called into his office, and she was fired right there on the spot. And that's exactly what happens. The minute you stand up and you disagree with, people call him the Fuhrer, if you disagree with the Fuhrer, stand by to stand by, because you're going to be on the chopping block. You're going to get fired, or you're going to get disciplined. And he's all about the culture of fuck around and find out. I mean, you see his daughter proudly displaying the T-shirts, "Fuck around and find out." Well, yeah, he means it. Fuck around and find out. And he's part of the culture of you burn them to learn them. He's all about firing people and then let them fight for their job back. It's been an ongoing thing with him, and the morale amongst the department members is just, you talk. It's in the sewer, to the point where employees are vandalizing their own locker rooms, writing about how bad the conditions are with the sheriff's department, and how they do not approve about Bianco's 27% raise. How about his politics, and what group he belongs to, and how the staff is getting screwed over while Chad Bianco gets a 27% immediate raise. I mean, there's pictures floating around of this vandalism, and it didn't just occur once; it occurred twice, 2 times in a row, that employees themselves are vandalizing their own locker rooms. And I'm not just talking about somebody scribbled something on the wall. I'm talking about these huge mirrors that get with permanent marker. They're writing all over them their hate and their disgust with Chad Bianco. I mean, it's gotten to the point where he's almost lost control. I mean, you've got employees over at different facilities, jail facilities, where they're expressing their concerns with their union leader, and a short time later, after, I mean, I'm being nice. I'm saying expressing their concerns, but basically they're talking shit to the president of the union. And a short time later, Bianco comes to the facility, finds that employee and chastises them for speaking out about things that are going on in the department. I mean, so
let me ask you, like, I've heard about contracts being used to have people give false testimony in courts. Do you know anything about that topic?
well, I don't really know too much about that. I know what you're talking about, but I can't really speak intelligently about that. I just know of what you're talking about. I can't go into detail about that. I know a lot of stuff. I know a lot of things, but that I'm not really familiar with. I know where you're going with that, and I have heard a few things about that, but I can't speak about that intelligently.
Michael Lujan had mentioned it, where like people have these contracts that the sheriff controls, and they know if they don't do as they're told, then the sheriff has the power to revoke the contract.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a case that I was following, that I believe that occurred, and Michael Lujan had mentioned that case. And from what I understand, not only did that, I'm trying to think of the name of, I believe it was Bevins or something like that. but they ended up losing their sheriff's department contract because the report that was written was contrary to what they wanted it to be. And so from what I heard is that the sheriff's department didn't like what he wrote because it was contrary to what they wanted it to be. They asked him to change it. He said no. The sheriff's department changed it without his knowledge and consent and presented it as being his own work. And then I believe they hid it. They hid it, or they didn't present it as it was supposed to be. But that's about all I know on that.
Got you. Man, is there anything that we didn't touch upon that's worth mentioning before we wrap it up here?
Well, I mean, just a couple of things. I mean, Bianco's ego is just I don't know how you can measure his ego. He's not a good steward of the people's money. He spends like it's going out of style. Rather than putting boots on the ground, out on patrol, helping the citizens of Riverside County, he creates all of these special teams that there's absolutely no need for. I mean, granted, we do need some special teams, but I mean, do we really need a full-time mounted posse team? I mean, really? Do we really need that? Or how much is that costing? And those are people that could be out there patrolling the streets in their black and white. That, and then you have all of the equipment that goes along with that. He went out and spent, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars on trucks and trailers, and Chad Bianco wanting to be Bonanza, the show from the 60s and 70s. He went out and bought himself a huge Chevy Silverado, all lifted with custom wheels and tinted windows and special lights and all that. The former sheriff drove his Crown Victoria till it had over 200,000 miles on it, and still didn't want to get a new car because he himself said that it's his job to save the citizens every single dime that he possibly can, and getting a new car when he doesn't need one is unnecessary. Yet you have, I believe, Chad's like on his third or fourth customized truck. He bought himself an F-250 lifted. I'm sorry, an F-150 lifted. And then he gave that to Dave Lelevere. So now Dave Lelevere has a lifted F-250. He went out and got himself a custom lifted Chevy Tahoe. And then he got himself the custom lifted Chevy Silverado. And, not just for him, but the entire executive staff, the CERT team has all these, customized F-250s lifted with rims and tires and tinted windows. And, it's like, is that really necessary?
That's so crazy. I mean, how is it even possible he gets away with that?
That's the thing, is that, he doesn't care. I mean, he flat out said, I'm the sheriff. I can do what I want. That's his attitude. That's his mentality, is that he is the sheriff. He can do what he wants. And basically, he is using this department as a stepping stone. I mean, him and his former assistant sheriff got into a not a fight, but a verbal argument regarding his being in uniform and supporting Donald Trump, which I don't have a problem with supporting Donald Trump. Just don't do it in uniform. And so the former assistant sheriff tells him, "Hey, dude, what are you doing?" To which Chad says, what do you care? He's like, "Listen, why don't you spend more time being the sheriff rather than trying to set the stage for governor?" And he got fired that same day. Pack up your shit and leave. And then he sends out an email showing that, because you have your work history, and I got the email too, or the screenshot, should I say, showing that it shows, he was working at this station, this station, this station. It shows your entire history. And his name's Paul Bennett, by the way. And so at the very, very end, it says terminated. Now, like, this guy gave 30 some odd years of his life to the sheriff's department. This is what you do to him? You sit there and you make fun of him being terminated because he had the balls to stand up to you? And that's the problem with Chad. If you have the balls to stand up to him, oh my God, stand by to stand by. You know, And it takes me back to the sergeant that had the balls to deny his son-in-law vacation time because they were short-staffed. You need to have bodies to run the jails. I mean, God knows there's bodies dropping left and right over in the jails. And so, Chad's son-in-law, the guy that shot the guy with the water bottle, should I say murdered the guy with the water bottle, he asked for vacation time because, Chad and fam are going to the river. So he asked for vacation time, and to which the sergeant said, no, I'm sorry, we don't have enough bodies to cover, so I'm going to have to deny your vacation time. So what happened to that sergeant? Well, that sergeant found himself being transferred to another facility about 80 miles away. He got some road therapy for denying Bianco's son-in-law vacation time. I mean, that's the kind of vindictive bullshit that goes on with Bianco. That's the kind of shit that we're dealing with on a daily basis. It's just he sits there and he pretends like he's so caring, and he fights these laws, and Senate Bill 2 SB 2 is terrible. It's going to bring down morale for law enforcement and this and that and the other. Yet as soon as it gets passed, he figured out a way that he could weaponize SB 2. That's Senate Bill 2, which basically allows you to decertify law enforcement officers for certain allegations that are found to be true, like lying. So Chad Bianco weaponized SB2, and what he does is he tries to tell on his own people that he doesn't like, and sends it to what's called POST, Peace Officer Standards of Training, that hold your certificate. And so what Chad does is he has his goons put together a case where they allege that you lied, send it to either the DA's office of prosecution, try to get them to try to sucker them into filing a charge, and then if not, file a complaint with Post and their SB2 unit, because Chad knows that if SB2 decertifies you, then he has every single right to fire you. He figured out a way to try to screw his employees over that he doesn't like. And it's and you go back to Chad's, and I hate to it's not his biological kid, but whatever, it's his daughter through marriage. But his daughter couldn't get hired on with the sheriff's department. She had issues with domestic violence, not being a victim, but on the latter. So she couldn't get hired before. No sooner than Chad Bianco comes into office, he orders personnel to hire her, despite them pushing back on her background. He says, "I don't care, hire her anyways." So now he's got his daughter working for the department, who's got no business being there. None at all. I mean, when it's like basically as soon as you see her, you walk the other way, because God forbid you say, so and so gave me a dirty look because now you're driving 80 miles to the next station. We had a captain over at the academy, Evan Peterson. Evan Peterson they were at a function, and Bianco's wife was sitting right next to him, and he had made a joke where he's saying, "Oh, he has to ask the sheriff for permission to do this, that, or the other," and then he jokingly says, "Well, I should ask the sheriff's wife instead, being that she's the decision maker," something to that effect. Well, guess what? Now he's driving 80 miles to the next station. So he got transferred out of his position and sent to, I think initially he was going to go to Court Services East, but he ended up going to Cabazon Station, simply because he made a joke that offended his wife. Who's Evan's not part of the Bunko Club, so he got disciplined for making a joke. Mr. Miller, there's so much more, but I'm telling you that you really do need to follow the money. I mean, there is some dirty, underhanded things going on with that. I mean, the venue that covered the last sheriff's picnic, they had some. And I'm not a big country music guy, but he had some famous country music singer come into the sheriff's picnic and sing, and I think that ended up costing him $90,000. And they had to do some some fancy math to figure out where the funds were going to come from. That included the Sheriff's Association, where they had to figure out a way to pay for that. And they did. They got the country music singer there, and it just keeps going and going and going. But if you decide you want to have me back again, there's a lot more that we can discuss.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the Blood Money podcast. For the viewers out there, thank you so much for joining us for this very special episode. I will see you all on the next episode of Blood Money. Thank you.